Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories was originally released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance handheld system, and serves as a sequel to the story told in the original Kingdom Hearts. Later, this game was remade for the PlayStation 2 under the name Chain of Memories, with improvements like new cutscenes, voice acting, and most importantly for us, new music. Keeping the soundtrack of KH-1 in mind, we can expand the families of motifs that we previously discussed with the new melodies that Shimomura created for this game. Since much of the music in Chain of Memories is reused from Kingdom Hearts 1, an official soundtrack was never released. However, the new reworked tracks that Shimomura created for Chain of Memories are included in 46 tracks on 2 CDs as part of the Kingdom Hearts Original Soundtrack Complete anthology that got released in 2007. In addition to these tracks, I went back and documented every occurrence of music that played in the original GBA release and added them to the spreadsheet document in the video description. This spreadsheet is a complete chronicle for all the music associated with the Chain of Memories story, and I'll use this to talk about the musical connections in this game. As before, we can divide the soundtrack into 5 categories so that they're easier to talk about. We have field, battle, event, character, and miscellaneous tracks in the COM soundtrack. You may notice many of the field and battle tracks for this game are familiar. Sora, in a sense, revisits many of the worlds from the previous game during Chain of Memories. I think the tracks that are most interesting in this soundtrack are the ones associated with the main antagonists in this game, and as we'll talk about, Shimomura, even with the limited sound capabilities of the Game Boy, does a lot to weave motivic references throughout the soundtrack to give the player a sense of familiarity and connection to both the music in this game, as well as much of the music from the original Kingdom Hearts. It's in this game that we see Shimomura laying down some of the finer groundwork that the rest of the series relies upon. So, in Chain of Memories, these are the tracks I was able to find that share connections. I've colored the music originally from KH-1 with blue circles, and the ones included in COM with silver. This distinction will be useful when talking about the musical material shared between the two games. Although the diagram is a little less populated than KH-1's, this can be largely attributed to the smaller game size and relatively fewer new original melodies, considering this was originally a handheld entry. But even so, I find it pretty interesting that there are this many connections within the game, and some of them might be surprising. So let's talk about them. Starting off, here are a few of the tracks that don't share any musical material with anything else in this soundtrack. But interestingly, what Chain of Memories does as an improvement over Kingdom Hearts 1 is that all of the pieces in the soundtrack are directly associated with a very specific reason for which they play, including these Orphan tracks. For example, Just Wondering is a mystery theme that plays only in story moments where things don't make sense to Sora or Riku. Some of the moments this track plays would be when Leon tells Sora they've never met, even though they did in the last game, or when Sora can't shake the feeling that the Twilight Town mansion seems familiar to him. It also plays when Riku wonders what will happen to him if he chooses to sleep like Sora, but Recom removes this in favor of playing Namine's theme, which is more appropriate for the scene. Piccolo Resto is lighthearted background music for funny or non-serious interactions. It plays in places like when Sora remembers Donald clobbering him as a Heartless in KH-1, or when Captain Hook introduces himself but the trio don't take him seriously and turn their backs to him. La Pace plays in similar places where A Piece of Peace might have played from KH-1. Usually it's a kind of congratulations theme for completing a world and reuniting Disney characters with their loved ones. And once again, Utada Hikaru's Hikari plays during the credits for all games that take place chronologically before KH2, this one included. From here, we can start to talk about the big family groups that share musical material, and the best place to start might be with the first piece of music that plays once the player begins the game. Memories in Pieces is a medley of themes that plays during the opening cutscene before Sora, Donald, and Goofy enter Castle Oblivion. The scenario picks up exactly where KH-1 left off, beginning with the hand-in-hand reprise that played during KH-1's post-credits cutscene, this also being the battle track that replaces Night of Fate in Traverse Town. If I didn't talk about it before, Hand in Hand seems to represent Sora, Donald, and Goofy's mutual partnership and shared mission. It's somewhat unique in the series that what I'd classify as a battle track is often used in this way. Next in the medley is Scent of Silence, when the mysterious hooded figure shows Sora the road leading to Castle Oblivion. Then, Namine's theme plays while the cutscene shows her drawing. And finally, the field theme, Castle Oblivion, when the trio arrive at the facility. Memories in Pieces is a very literal score with no original material that foreshadows these themes the player will experience throughout the game. Next, let me quickly run through some of the smaller groups that seem to reference or be based on tracks from the previous game. Most of these have only one or two connections that I found interesting enough to talk about. I can use this opportunity to talk a little bit about Namine's theme. It's surprisingly pretty original and mostly disconnected from the rest of the series' soundtrack, considering that we later learn she's Kairi's nobody. I might have expected to find a reference to Kairi's actual theme, but no melodic connection seems to exist. I did, however, notice that the harmonic progression between Namine and Kairi is almost identical, for what that's worth. That said, it seemed like Shimomura either wanted to make Namine distinct as a character, or she was told to not connect the two melodically. As an aside, I really like when character themes in the series are completely original like this. It makes the characters that these tracks represent feel more fundamental to the story. The more unique a character theme is, the more useful it can be to implement as a quote in event or battle tracks, as we'll hear with other pieces in future videos. Like I mentioned in the KH-1 video, the Always on My Mind medley contains this statement that integrates with Every Dearly Beloved coming after KH-1 in the chronology. This is also held here in Chain of Memories. Listen to the recom Dearly Beloved for the Always on My Mind quote. Notably, Always on My Mind played in the original GBA ending for Sora's story the same way it played in KH-1, but this was replaced with voice dialogue only in Recom. Next, Struggle Away is the Chain of Memories Heartless battle track, playing for all end-world Heartless boss battles like Parasite Cage, Guard Armor, and Trickmaster. We can take note of the very similar bass pattern of the Heartless boss battle theme from KH-1, Shrouding Dark Cloud. The comparisons don't stop there though. In addition to this, notice that both of these tracks have extremely similar stepwise melodies. Here I've transcribed both in the same key so it's easier to compare. No other track in COM uses this 6/4 clave like these two do, and I thought I'd use this rhythmic motif to represent all of these uncanny similarities between the two. From all this, it seems clear that Shimomura was likely using Shrouding Dark Cloud as a sort of template when composing Struggle Away. We didn't talk a whole lot about Villains of a Sort in the KH-1 video, but that track played not only for every interaction with Maleficent, but also for several of the individual villain introductions, Disney and otherwise. Here in Chain of Memories, the track Disquieting takes that role. It plays in this game as a general antagonist theme for introducing the Disney villains, a few replica Riku encounters, and a couple of the organization interactions. There's no exact pitch match I could find between the melodies of Villains of a Sort and Disquieting, but the structure, instrumentation, and tonality, or rather lack thereof, between these two is notably similar, and the shared role between these pieces is clear. That's why I've marked them in the diagram in the same family as sharing a whole tone scale. Later in the series, Villains of a Sort returns exclusively as Maleficent's theme, and in general, generic villain introduction tracks like Disquieting are done away with and altogether replaced with more concrete and connected antagonist themes during important scenes. The Castle Oblivion group here is somewhat unique among field and battle pairs, in that they are related by a phrase shape in a way that most field battle world music throughout the games is not. Take a listen to the harp shared between the field theme, Castle Oblivion, and the associated battle theme, Forgotten Challenge. It's difficult to hear in the battle track, but we can see from a transcription of the harp that they both contain this sort of 2-3-1-5 pattern. Now, what I like to do when thinking about the soundtracks to each of the KH games is listening to the common instruments Shimomura uses for the important tracks. Usually we can hear the instrumental emphasis in that game's version of Dearly Beloved, but I think this sort of tradition was established in the games beyond Chain of Memories. From these Castle Oblivion tracks though, we might be able to confidently say that the sound of Chain of Memories seems heavily based on instrumentation involving the harp and the organ, and we'll hear more pieces soon where organ and harp continue to take the helm, further cementing this idea. The next few families are somewhat larger than the previous ones we talked about. We are getting into the important tracks in COM, and we'll notice Shimomura weaving in melodies we are either already familiar with or have been exposed to throughout the game. Regarding Ansem, Shimomura continues being extra clear in linking together any tracks related to this enemy. Forza del Male doesn't play in Chain of Memories, but two tracks that borrow motifs originating from Forza del Male do make an appearance in the game. The first is The Force in You, which is exclusively Replica Riku's battle theme. It's connected by both of these motives, one of which we talked about last time. The second is Revenge of Chaos, which is the battle track in Riku's story against the embodiment of darkness, Ansem, that remains in his heart. It's interestingly only connected by the first motif. It's interesting when listening back to Revenge of Chaos to take note of how only one of the Ansem motives is used, unlike The Force in You. Riku's journey throughout the game has been to rid himself of Ansem's influence and the darkness that still lingers, so we can hear the progression of his journey in the notable lack of Ansem's primary motif from The Force in You and Forza del Male. It's like Shimomura is expressing to the player how far Riku's come, and how he sort of pushed away Ansem's statement and reclaimed the organ intro that used to indicate Ansem's presence. Revenge of Chaos is less like a villain theme for his adversary and more like a hero theme for Riku. Next, a few unique themes were composed for Chain of Memories that share this chromatically falling line, which is a pretty big commonality between many of the original themes in this game. I had a hard time trying to reconcile the tracks that make up the Secrets group because this motif is shared by a traitor theme, a remorse theme, and 3 organization battle themes. It was difficult to find the story connection between all these pieces, but I think that the family name Secrets works best in order to convey the purpose for this motif's integration into these tracks. Scent of Silence plays when characters are generally sad, or more specifically, burdened by some sort of guilt. I didn't find any instances where this track was specifically used for an organization-only interaction, though. This track plays a small variation of the descending chromatic motif, which can also be partially heard from the main melody of the 13th Struggle. As for the track 13th Discretion, this is a traitor plotting theme, usually reserved for the organization coup interactions for those members in Castle Oblivion. We can also hear this statement again in the organization battle track, the 13th Struggle, which plays when Sora or Riku challenge an organization member. And this association with secrecy makes sense in context because Sora and Riku, despite being antagonized by this group, never actually discover what the organization's purpose is in this game. As a bit of interesting trivia, the 13th Struggle track was incorrectly played when Riku battled Ansem the first time in the original GBA release. But once again, Recom fixed this mistake and correctly replaced that instance with the Ansem battle theme, Revenge of Chaos. It's nice when ports pay attention to musical consistency. The inclusion of the Secrets motif in the final tracks related to Marluxia seems especially appropriate, considering he was the one who spearheaded the coup d'etat effort at the castle. You can hear the Secrets motif briefly in the harp during Scythe of Petals, which plays for final Marluxia in the GBA game and Phase 2 of the battle in Recom. For Recom's final Marluxia, the Secrets motif can also be heard in Lord of the Castle. Another interesting observation, it seems that Scythe of Petals and the 13th Struggle also have another connection. They share this rising bass pattern. I didn't add this shared statement to the chart though, because more than anything, it seems like Scythe was quoting this organization battle to give itself weight as a sort of higher class battle theme, rather than that specific motif meaning anything special. But those two are linked in this way, which is neat. Marluxia's themes seem to draw on many elements of the organization tracks that played prior. Although only hinted at, one of the most important motifs appearing in Chain of Memories is the Organization 13 statement. I get the impression that Shimomura originally intended the falling chromatic Secrets motif to be the organization connection, considering that we only explicitly hear this 5-note Org 13 quote in the final battle tracks of the game, and not at all during other tracks I might have expected to hear it in, like 13th Discretion or the Chain of Memories version of the 13th Struggle. The Organization 13 motif originated from the track Another Side from KH-I's Secret Ending, and is only developed into a full, unique track with a clearly distinct meaning in Kingdom Hearts 2, so it may be more likely that the GBA references here to Org 13 are more so referencing a fragment of Another Side. But knowing what we do about the musical future of the series, we can take note of the tracks that do incorporate this statement. And of course, considering that the organization continues to be a threat in the subsequent games, this motif family will be expanded greatly in the future. This motif appears only in organization-related pieces, and we can hear it in Graceful Assassin quoting Another Side. Lord of the Castle, which was composed after KH-II established that this motif belonged to Organization 13, has a more cohesive and distinct integration of the motif. The arrangement of the 13th Struggle that plays in Chain of Memories doesn't include this organization motif, so that's why it is not included in this group, but the statement is incorporated into the KH-II arrangement later on. We've talked about a lot of tracks so far, and the final group we'll discuss is how several tracks in Chain of Memories reference Dastati from KH-I. For the most part, many of these references come across as afterthoughts or incorporations of elements from Another Side. But even so, the impression these tracks leave on the player is reminiscent of the same feeling of danger we got when approaching the final door from KH-I. I should mention the tier-like system by which Shimomura composed the most important elements of this group of tracks. First came the foundational Dastati that contained many usable motives relating to matters of the heart. Shimomura then used a Dastati motif to develop a fundamental part of the track Another Side, which itself was subsequently used to develop many of the tracks related to the organization. So the pieces included in this family are much bigger in scope and importance due to the tighter interconnectivity of motives, which also makes these tracks difficult to talk about individually without commenting on all the things, Dastati and otherwise, that constitute these pieces. But we can begin with the most straightforward. Forgotten Challenge seems to be one of the more direct quotes of Destati. This Castle Oblivion battle track contains the iconic thumping bass pattern. What a callback to Fragments of Sorrow, which itself is a Destati sub-theme that also acted in a similar way, as the battle track throughout the final level of KH-1, End of the World. The following are the 3 Versus Marluxia tracks, and each of them contain a Destati fragment that helped to link them together, as well as give them immense importance to the overall world of Kingdom Hearts. Marluxia is musically played up to be a very important figure, and obviously he is the leader of the antagonists in this game. Specifically, Graceful Assassin is a rearranged sort of battle version of Another Side, and as such, it contains the ascending Destati ostinato throughout. Scythe of Petals is more original, acting as the final battle in the GBA version of the game. The connection I heard to Destati might be coincidental, but there's a long descent just before the loop that resembles the darkness motif from Destati that we talked about in the KH-1 video. The rhythm is different, which makes me question if it's truly a reference or a happy coincidence, but you can listen for yourself here. Finally, Lord of the Castle, which again was newly added for Recom, also includes a few strong statements of the darkness motif from Destati. I think the references I pointed out are genuine, but because the connections I found to Destati for Scythe of Petals and Lord of the Castle are relatively small and not very overt, it makes me think that if any of these Marluxia tracks has a true connection to Destati, it would probably be those that primarily reference Another Side, like Graceful Assassin did. So, these are the musical connections that Yoko Shimomura's tracks from Chain of Memories created for the series. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of focus that COM puts on cohesive instrumentation and chromaticism. We hear lots of tracks throughout the game emphasizing harp phrases and organ backing, and it gives Chain of Memories and the castle this sterile, ominous, kind of hollow feeling. It's a very unique kind of sound for the series, even considering the soundscape of future games. I noticed too that there's a lack of Dearly Beloved in this game, aside from when it plays for the title and end card. I was, however, thrilled to find those references back to Destati though, and the use of the organization motif in this game was a thoughtful incorporation of what Another Side had introduced from KH-1, even if it's somewhat surprising how infrequently it appears. The next video will be an exploration of the music in Kingdom Hearts 2, what many consider, myself included, one of the highest points in the series' musical storytelling. KH2, using the body of music established for the series so far, will blow open the door and allow for the resolution of several musical arcs, as well as the introduction and continuation of many more.